Hours later, the innkeeper stood in the doorway of the waystone and let his eyes relax to the darkness. Footprints of lamplight from the inn's windows fell across the dirt road and the doors of the smithy across the way. It was not a large road, nor well-traveled. It didn't seem to lead anywhere, as some roads do. The innkeeper drew a deep breath of autumn air and looked around restlessly, as if waiting for something to happen. He called himself Cote. He had chosen the name carefully when he came to this place. He had taken a new name for most of the usual reasons and for a few unusual ones as well. Not the least of which was the fact that names were important to him. Looking up, he saw 1,000 stars glittering in the deep velvet of a night with no moon. He knew them all, their stories and their names. He knew them in a familiar way, the way he knew his own hands. And looking down, Cote sighed without knowing it, and went back inside. He locked the door and shuttered the wide windows of the inn, as if to distance himself from the stars and all their varied names. He swept the floor methodically, catching all the corners. He washed the tables and the bar, moving with patient efficiency. And at the end of an hour's work, the water in his bucket was still clean enough for a lady to wash her hands in. Finally, he pulled a stool behind the bar and began to polish the vast array of bottles nestled between the two huge barrels. He wasn't nearly as crisp and efficient about this chore as he had been with the others, and it soon became obvious that the polishing was only excuses to touch and hold. He even hummed a little, although he did not realize it, and would have stopped himself if he had known. As he turned the bottles in his long, graceful hands, the familiar motion eased a few tired lines from his face, making him seem younger, certainly not yet 30, not even near 30. Young for an innkeeper, young for a man with so many tired lines remaining on his face. Cote came to the top of the stairs and opened the door. His room was austere, almost monkish. There was a black stone fireplace in the corner of the room, a pair of chairs, and a small desk. The only other furniture was a narrow bed with a large, dark chest at its foot, and nothing decorated the walls or covered the wooden floor. There were footsteps in the hall, and a young man stepped into the room carrying a bowl of stew that steamed and smelled of pepper. He was dark and charming, with a quick smile and cunning eyes. "You haven't been this late in a span of days," he said as he handed over the bowl. "There must have been good stories tonight, Reishi." Reishi was another of the innkeeper's names, a nickname almost. The sound of it tugged on the corner of his mouth into a wry smile as he sank into the deep chair in front of the fire. "So what did you learn today, Bast?" "Today, master, I learned why great lovers have better eyesight than great scholars." "And why is that, Bast?" Cote asked, amusement touching the edges of his voice. Bast closed the door and returned to sit in the second chair, turning it to face his teacher and the fire. He moved with a strange delicacy and grace, as if he were close to dancing. "Well, Reishi, all the rich books are found inside where the light is bad, but lovely girls tend to be out in the sunshine, and therefore much easier to study without risk of injuring one's eyes." Cote nodded. "But an exceptionally clever student could take a book outside, thus bettering himself without fear of lessening his much-loved faculty of sight." "I thought the same thing, Reishi, being, of course, an exceptionally clever student. Of course. But when I found a place in the sun where I could read, a beautiful girl came along and kept me from doing anything of the sort," Bast finished with a flourish. Cote sighed. "Am I correct in assuming you didn't manage to read any of the Calum tincture today?" Bast managed to look somewhat ashamed. Looking into the fire, Cote tried to assume a stern face and failed. "Ah, Bast, I hope she was lovely as a warm wind in the shade. I'm a bad teacher to say it, but I'm glad. I don't feel up to a long bout of lessons right now. There was a moment of silence. Carter was attacked by a Skraeling tonight. Bast's easy smile fell away like a cracked mask, leaving his face stricken and pale. A Skrael? He came halfway to his feet as if he would bolt from the room, and then gave an embarrassed frown and forced himself back down into his chair. How do you know? Who found his body? He's still alive, Bast. He brought it back. There was only one. There's no such thing as one Skraeling, Bast said flatly. You know that. I know, Cote said. The fact remains, there was only one. And he killed it? Bast said. It couldn't have been a Skraeling. Maybe Bast. It was one of the Skrael. I saw it. Cote gave him a serious look. He was very lucky, that's all. And even so, he was very badly hurt. 48 stitches. I used up nearly all my gut. Cote picked up his bowl of stew. If anyone asks, tell them my grandfather was a caravan guard who taught me how to clean and stitch a wound. They were too shocked to ask about it tonight, but tomorrow some of them might get curious, and I don't want that. He blew into his bowl, raising a cloud of steam around his face. What did you do with the body? I didn't do anything with it, Cote said pointedly. I am just an innkeeper. This sort of thing is quite beyond me. Reishi, you can't just let them muddle through this on their own. Cote sighed. They took it to the priest. He did all the right things for all the wrong reasons. Bast opened his mouth, but Cote continued before he could say anything. Yes, I made sure the pit was deep enough. Yes, I made sure there was a rowan wood in the fire. Yes, I made sure that it burned long and hot before they buried it. And yes, I made sure that no one kept a piece of it as a souvenir. He scowled, his eyebrows drawing together. I'm not an idiot, you know. Bast visibly relaxed, settling back into his chair. I know you're not, Reishi, but I wouldn't trust half of these people to piss leeward without help. He looked thoughtful for a moment. I can't imagine why there was only one. Maybe they died coming over the mountains, Cote suggested. All but this one. It's possible, Bast admitted reluctantly. Maybe it was that storm from a couple days back, Cote pointed out. A real wagon tipper, as we used to say back in the troop. All the wind and rain might have scattered the loose one from the pack. I like your first idea better, Reishi, Bast said uncomfortably. 3 or 4 Skrael would go through the town like a hot knife through butter? More like several hot knives through several dozen farmers, Bast said dryly. These people can't defend themselves, and I bet there aren't 6 swords in this whole town. Not that swords would do much against the Skrael. There was a long moment of thoughtful silence. After a moment, Bast began to fidget. Any news? Cote shook his head. They didn't get to the news tonight. Carter disrupted things while they were still telling stories, and that's something, I suppose. They'll be back tomorrow night. It'll give me something to do. Cote poked his spoon idly in the stew. I should have bought the Skraeling from Carter, he mused. He could have used the money for a new horse. People would have come from all over to see it. We could have some business for a change. Bast gave him a speechless, horrified look. Cote made a pacifying gesture with his hand that held the spoon. I'm joking, Bast. He gave a weak smile. Still, it would have been nice. No, Reishi. It most certainly would have not been nice, Bast said emphatically. People would have come from all over to see it, he repeated derisively. Indeed. The business would have been nice, Cote clarified. Busyness. would be nice. He jabbed his spoon into the stew again. Anything would be nice. They sat for a long moment, Cote scowling down the bowl of stew in his hands, his eyes far away. "It must be awful for you here, Bast," he said at last. "You must be numb with boredom." Bast shrugged. "There are a few young wives in town, a scattering of daughters." He grinned like a child. "I tend to make my own fun." "That's good, Bast." There was another silence. Cote took another spoonful, chewed, and swallowed. "They thought it was a demon, you know." Bast shrugged. "It might as well be, Reishi. It's probably the best thing for them to think." "I know. I encouraged them, in fact, but you know what that means." He met Bast's eyes. "The blacksmith is going to be doing a brisk business in the next couple of days." Bast's expression went carefully blank. "Oh." Cote nodded. "I won't blame you if you want to leave, Bast. You have better places to be than this." Bast's expression was shocked. "I couldn't leave, Reishi." He opened and closed his mouth a few times, at a loss for words. "Who else would teach me?" Cote grinned, and for a moment his face showed how truly young he was. Behind the weary lines in the placid innkeeper's expression he looked no older than his dark-haired companion. Who indeed? He gestured towards the door with his open spoon. "Go do your reading, then, or bother someone else's daughter. I'm sure you have better things to do than watch me eat. Actually—" "Begone, demon!" Cote said, switching to a thickly accented Temic through a half-mouthful of stew. "Teus antausa eha." Bast burst into a startled laughter and made an obscene gesture with one of his hands. Cote swallowed and changed languages. "Aroi te dena leen." "Oh, come now," Bast reproached, his smile falling away. "That's just insulting." "By earth and stone, I abjure you!" Cote dipped his fingers into the cup by his side and flicked droplets casually at Bast's direction. "Glamour be banished!" "With cider?" Bast managed to look amused and annoyed at the same time, as he daubed a bead of liquid from his front of his shirt. "This better not stain." Cote took another bite of his dinner. "Go soak it. If the situation becomes desperate, I recommend that you avail yourself of the numerous solvent formulae extant with Kelum tincture. Chapter 13, I believe." "Fine." Bast stood and walked to the door, stepping with his strange, casual grace. "Call if you need anything." He closed the door behind himself. Cote ate slowly, mopping up the last of the stew with a piece of bread. He looked out the window as he ate, or tried to, as the lamplight turned. Its surface was mirror-like against the dark behind it. His eyes wandered the room restlessly. The fireplace was made of the same black rock as the one downstairs. It stood in the center of the room, a minor feat of engineering in which Cote was rather proud. The bed was small, little more than a cot, and if you were to touch it, you would find that the mattress was almost non-existent. A skilled observer might notice that there was something his gaze avoided, the same way you avoid meeting the eye of an old lover at a formal dinner, or that of an old enemy sitting across the room in a crowded alehouse late at night. Cote tried to relax, failed, fidgeted and sighed, shifted in his seat, and without willing, his eyes fell on the chest at the floor of the bed. It was made of roa, a rare, heavy wood, dark as coal, smooth as polished glass. Prized by perfumers and alchemists, a piece the size of your thumb was easily worth gold. To have a chest made of it went far beyond extravagance. The chest was sealed 3 times. It had a lock of iron, a lock of copper, and a lock that could not be seen. Tonight, The wood filled the room with the almost imperceptible aroma of citrus and quenching iron. When Cote's eyes fell on the chest, they did not dart quickly away. They did not slide slyly to the side as if he would pretend it wasn't there at all. But in a moment of looking, his face regained all the lines. Simple pleasures of the day had slowly smoothed away. The comfort of his bottles and books was erased in a second, leaving nothing behind his eyes but emptiness and ache. And for a moment, fierce longing and regret weared across his face. And then they were gone, replaced by the weary face of an innkeeper, a man who called himself Cote. He sighed again, without knowing it, and pushed himself to his feet. It was a long time before he would walk past that chest to the bed, and once in bed, it was a long time before he slept. As Cote had guessed, they came back to the Waystone the next night for dinner and drinks. There were a few half-hearted attempts at stories, but they died out quickly, and no one was really in the mood. And so, it was still early in the evening when the discussion turned to the matters of greater import. They chewed over the rumors that had come into town, most of them troubling. The penitent king was having a difficult time with the rebels at Revsek. This caused some concern, but only in a general way. Revsek was a long way off, and even Cobb, the most worldly of them, would be hard-pressed to find it on the map. They discussed the war in their own terms. Cobb predicted a third levy tax after the harvests were in. No one argued, and though there hadn't been a 3-bleeder a year in living memory, Jake guessed that the harvest would be good enough so that the third levy wouldn't break most families, except the Bentleys, who were on hard times anyway, and the Orisons, whose sheep kept disappearing, and Crazy Martin, who had planted all the barley this year. Every farmer with half a brain had planted beans. That was one good thing about all the fighting. Soldiers ate beans, and prices would be high. After a few more drinks, deeper concerns were voiced. Deserter soldiers and other opportunists were thick on the roads, making it short trips risky. The roads were always bad, of course, in the same way that winter was always cold. You complained, took sensible precautions, and got on with the business of living your life. But this was different. Over the last 2 months, the roads had become so bad that people had stopped complaining. The last caravan had 2 wagons and 4 guards. The merchant had been asking 10 pennies for half a pound of salt, 15 for a loaf of sugar. He didn't have any pepper or cinnamon or chocolate. He did have 1 small sack of coffee, but he wanted 2 silver talents for that. And at first, people had laughed at his prices, and then, when he held firm, folk had spat and cursed at him. That had been 2 span ago, 22 days. There had not been another serious trader since, and even though this was the season for it, so despite the third levy tax looming large in everyone's minds, people were looking in their purses and wishing they had bought a little something, just in case the snow came early. No one spoke of the previous night and of the thing that they had burned and buried. Other folk were talking, of course, and the town was alive with gossip. Carter's wounds ensured that the stories were taken half seriously, but not much more than half. The word demon was being spoken, but it was with smiles half hidden behind raised hands. Only the 6 friends had seen the thing before it was burned, and one of them had been wounded, and the others had been drinking. The priest had seen it too, but it was his job to see demons. Demons were good for his business. The innkeeper had seen it too, apparently, but he wasn't from around here. He couldn't know the truth that was so apparent to everyone born and raised in this little town. Stories were told here, but they happened somewhere else. and this was not a place for demons. Besides, things were bad enough without borrowing trouble. Cobb and the rest knew that there was no sense talking about it. Trying to convince folk would only make them a laughingstock, like Crazy Martin, who had been trying to dig a well inside of his own house for years now. Still, each of them bought a piece of cold raw iron from the smith, heavy as they could swing, and none of them said what they were thinking. Instead, they complained that the roads were bad and getting worse. They talked about the merchants and the deserters and the levies and not having enough salt to last the winter. They reminisced at 3 years ago when no one would have even thought of locking their doors at night, let alone barring them. And the conversation took a downward turn from there. And even though none of them said what they were thinking, the evening ended on a grim note. And most evenings did these days, times being what they were.